you've finished a cross-stitch piece and even popped it into a hoop. But now it looks like this, and you have the daunting task of figuring out how to finish it neatly. There are lots of ways to do this, but they often seem like quite a lot of effort, require sewing skills, or are very permanent, such that you can't ever do anything else with that piece if you change your mind in the future. So here's my new favourite way to finish a hoop. Pretty fab, right? So these are hoop butts, and they were such a game changer that I absolutely had to share them with you. Hi there, Stitchy friends. I'm Kat from Catkin and Lily, bringing you all the best tips, tricks and tutorials so you can learn more about all things stitchy, grow your stitching skills and get the most joy from your stitching. There are endless ways to finish cross-stitch projects, such as frames, flat folds, stretched on a canvas, made into a bag or cushion, and so on. But one of the most popular has to be in an embroidery hoop. It's definitely a favourite finish for me as it looks so good and it's pretty easy and cheap to do. Getting the fabric into the hoop is not always the easiest, and watch this space for more on that in another video. But even after that, what do you do about finishing the back? Maybe you use some form of sewing or lacing to pull all the fabric together. Maybe you trim the fabric close right up to the hoop. Maybe you glue it into place, or maybe you attach felt to the back. It's also entirely possible that you put it aside to come back to later and that's how it stays. Because yes, I've been there. This video is not going to cover the myriad finishing options, just one simple way that I think might just be the easiest, fastest, and possibly, depending on your opinion, neatest way to do it. So, we are talking hoop covers or hoop butts. These fall into two categories, ones that you stick on the back of the hoop and ones that you push into the hoop. They are both excellent, although I would say the ones you push into the hoop are faster and also not permanent, which might be something that's important to you if you want to change out what is in the hoop. So I'm going to be talking more about the ones that you push into the hoop, but I will show you both options. One thing to be aware of is that the items I'm showing you have been bought in the UK because that's where I live, but hopefully you'll be able to find something similar in your country. And there's also the other option I'm going to share, which is how to make your own, so don't miss that, and here's a little sneak peek of what that's going to look like. Okay, let's look at some examples. And you can find links to all of the products that I'm using, and also for any PDF cross-stitch patterns in the description. So first up, I briefly want to mention the stick-on kind of cover. And of course, this is the permanent option because it's going to be glued into place. The ones I have here are from StitchKits hoops. These are made of plywood, so it's nice and light, but really quite sturdy. And they have "Made with Love" on them. But of course, if you don't want this showing, you could always use the other side. Now, this supplier also sells a glue, this one here, that is great for attaching the cover to the hoop, because you do want something that's a bit stronger than PVA glue to make sure that it's really secure. Now, they're very easy to use and they do come with instructions, so I'm not going to show that today. But you basically imagine if your work was in here and this was the back, you would glue round the edge and the cover is sized to fit onto that. So I can show you this one I have here. This is a project, this design came in a Cotton and Twine monthly subscription box. And so it's in the hoop, and then on the back I have glued the cover in place. Now, I did gather the fabric around the edge with a running stitch first, just to keep it all in place before I glued the back on. And I have one here, I can show you what that looks like. I just did a little running stitch just to keep that fabric in place before I glued the back on. Now, the style of hoop butt that I really wanted to focus on in this video, which are my new favourites, are the ones that sit inside the hoop. I love these because they are super easy to use, they're removable, And they also don't really require you to do anything with your fabric first, although you'll see in a bit that I do tend to trim mine. Now this one from Cape Blandford was the first time that I came across hoop butts. These are made from maple veneered MDF. They're really lovely quality, really thick, particularly compared to some of the others that I've seen. Currently they do only come in 4-inch and 5-inch sizes. You can choose to have it with or without a hole, which can be handy for hanging, but also for removing the back. And they have cute engraved text. I really rather like this one. But of course, again, you could use the reverse for a plain finish. So the other one I have is this one from Love Poppet. This one's made from poplar plywood, so it is a little bit thinner, also has a hole in it, and it's only available in a 6 or 7-inch at the moment. So let me show you how easy these are to use. I'm going to use the Cape Blandford hoop butt to demonstrate here, and I've already wrangled the fabric into a hoop. And as I've mentioned, you can just leave your fabric square like this. Now, leaving the fabric square will give you maximum flexibility if you ever wanted to take it out and do something different with it. However, I've found that when you turn this over, you're going to be pushing the fabric inside. And I found that the corners of the fabric can be a bit pokey and potentially cause lumps that could be visible from the front. The same applies to the amount of excess fabric that you've got around the hoop. You don't want to have loads because it will bunch up more, it's harder to get a neat finish, and again, it can potentially poke through to the front. But equally, you don't want to cut it too small and leave yourself short if you ever wanted to do something else with it in future. Now, I reckon I'm pretty unlikely to ever want to change this out from the hoop, so I'm happy with a fairly small margin of fabric. As long as you've got enough that you can poke it inside to there, that's really all that you need. That's your absolute minimum, I would say, which is about 2 centimetres. So I'm going to trim off the corners of this piece. And I'm not going to do anything really special with it. It definitely doesn't have to be neat. I'm just going to trim so it's now going to be very roughly circular. Just gives me a little bit less fabric around there, and it will be just a little bit easier when it comes to actually pushing the fabric in. One thing I would say is that if you're framing something and it has the selve edge on it, then I would try and trim this off if you can, because it is a little bit thicker. So it could make things just a little bit more difficult when you're folding the fabric in. And again, just more risk of distorting the front of your piece. The next thing I like to do is to make myself a circle of card. This is fairly thin card, and a circle of felt. And I'm going to use these to put inside the hoop to protect my stitching. Now you can do these simply by using another hoop of the same size, or if you don't have another hoop, make sure you do this step before you put your fabric in the hoop. And then you're just going to draw around the inside of the hoop onto felt and onto thin card and cut that out, cutting just inside the pencil line so that your piece of card is just going to fit inside the hoop, and the same with your piece of felt. These definitely don't have to be perfect circles. Don't worry too much. You're not even going to see them when it's finished. So, as I've already touched on, the reason I'm doing this is to protect your stitching, and it will also help to stop any fabric pushing on the front of the design when you push that fabric in and put the hoop butt in. So the circle of felt goes in first. That will protect your stitching. It also stops the colour of the backing showing through on the front. and the felt will give the front a slightly padded look when the back's pushed into place, which I think looks really lovely and professional. You could also use thin wadding, also known as batting, in place of the felt. So then the circle of thin card goes in on top, which is another layer of protection for your stitching. And again, its main purpose is something a little bit sturdier than the felt to stop any fabric when it gets pushed in that could be pushing on the front of your stitching and making it look lumpy. So once those are in place, you're going to start pushing the fabric in. And I just like to work my way round. It can sort of find its own way. Just push it in. What I like to do is just make sure that where the folds are, you haven't got any too close together, that it's going to sit fairly neatly. That top section is always the worst. There we go, that's a little bit neater. And at this stage, I'm just pushing this in and giving the fabric kind of an idea of where it's going to go. It starts to get a little bit of a memory, I guess, of where I want it to be. And I think we're sort of back round to the beginning. Just tuck that in. That seems okay. Okay, so I've just given it that idea of pushing all that fabric inwards. Once I'm happy with that, it is time for the hoop butt. Now, of course, if you want this, if you are going to use the hole and the bit with this, then you probably want to make sure that it's up the right way. So I've got my hole at the top next to there. And then I'm just going to sort of put it in place on here. And then I'm just going to sort of look around the edge and see this. See, this is all quite neat just here. But if I come around here, this is bunched up a little bit. So I just need to push that underneath, just make sure that at all of those folds, just really tuck it in. And you can see the hoop butt's just starting to slide into place. So I'm going to put it the right way up, and again, just turn it so I can see that that's up the way I want it. And then I'm just going to press that down. And you can see it's sometimes easier then to lift this up rather than pushing it on here, to lift it up and just press. So I've got my fingers on the back of the hoop here. So I've got my fingers just resting here, and I'm just going to push really gently. It actually just kind of goes in. You don't need to push too hard. And then the moment of truth, turn it over, and there's our finished hoop. Now, it may not come across super well on the video, but there is a lovely, slightly padded effect to the front because of that felt that we've put in. And also, this on the back just pushes in a little bit and just makes your stitching really pop beautifully. I don't know if I turn it slightly sideways if you'll be able to see. Probably not. But I think that looks absolutely fantastic. Super easy to do, and also super neat. Okay, so I mentioned that you can make your own hoop butts, and there are two reasons for doing this. The first one is cost, because you can make your own super cheaply. And the second reason, and this is why I started making my own, is for non-standard hoop sizes or shapes. The only ones I'm looking at today are circular, but if you had a hoop that was oval or square, then I don't think I've seen any hoop butts that would work with that. And the circular ones are generally designed to fit a very standard 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, etc. hoop, such as this Elbesee one. Now, my favourite hoops are these Nurge hoops. And I love these because they're made from beech wood, so they feel a little bit more luxurious. They're a little bit thicker, and the metal findings on the top I feel are a little bit nicer. But they actually do come up a little bit bigger in size than a standard 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, etc. So this is a standard 6-inch hoop, and you can see if I take the Love Poppet hoop butt, that's going to fit really nicely in there. But if I take that same hoop butt and put it in the Nurge hoop, there's probably too much wiggle room around there, and I don't think it would hold the fabric in place. It's probably going to fall out. Similarly, with the stick-on covers, that's going to fit beautifully on there. But if I put it on the Nurge, it does just about cover it, but not very well. It's really just a little bit too small. So here's the first hoop butt that I ever made, just as a little bit of a test. And I used a piece of cardboard from a cardboard box. So I just got in a little bit of upcycling there as well. And I just used the inner hoop and drew round it, cut it out and pushed it into place. And I actually just laughed when I saw how well it worked. I was very excited that I could make my own hoop butts this easily. Now, in terms of the cardboard, you definitely want a bit of sturdiness to the card, but you do need to be able to cut it out fairly easily. I have continued to find that cardboard packaging is a fantastic option, but just try out what you have to hand and see what works. Now, the back of this piece of cardboard was plain, so totally fine just to leave it as is, and it looks great. But of course, you can take it a step further and make the back look even prettier. You could cover it with patterned paper or perhaps cover it with fabric. So the actual process is basically the same as using a bought hoop butt, but just making your own. I've got my stitching in the hoop. I've trimmed it to a rough circle. I've got my piece of felt that I'm going to pop inside and my piece of thin card. And again, you're going to push the fabric so that it's all inside. So this is my homemade hoop butt made from a piece of not particularly thick cardboard and a nice piece of pattern paper. And I've made this again by drawing around the inside of the hoop, and you can see it's a little bit smaller than the hoop. So I draw around the inside and cut round, again, cut inside your pencil line so it'll be a little bit smaller and there's space for it to go into the hoop, accounting for the fact that you've got a bit of thickness of fabric on there as well. Now, as you can see, it's not perfectly circular because no one's really going to pay that much attention to it. If you have a die cutting machine or some other way of cutting out beautiful perfect circles, then absolutely go ahead and use that. But I just cut these by hand. And the paper that I've used came from a 6-inch paper pad. I love these paper pads that have lots of different pattern papers in them that you can use, but you could use absolutely any pattern paper that you've got to hand. I think offcuts of wrapping paper would work absolutely brilliantly. So those have just been glued together with PVA glue, and then exactly the same of just popping your hoop butt into there. And so this is looking all pretty neat around there, so I can just push it into place like that. And again, I've got that lovely padded finish on the front and lovely neat back. I think it looks so cute, and of course completely unique to you with the pattern paper that you've used. You could even write on the back, you could pop a little label on there if you wanted to sign your work and add a date. And of course you can put a hole in there for hanging or for easy removal of the hoop butt if you like, but I'll show you, it's really easy to get them out. I just pop a nail underneath and out it pops. But you could put a hole or just put a little notch in there if you want to make it even easier. And it just pops in and out so easily. I hope you've enjoyed seeing how easily and neatly you can finish your embroidery hoops using hoop butts, whether you buy them or make your own. I would really love to hear if you've used them or if this video has inspired you to try them out, so do leave me a comment to let me know. If you found this video helpful, then please do give the video a like and be sure to subscribe for more stitchy tips and tutorials. Thank you so much for watching, and happy stitching!